This week, I wanted to talk about macro surveys. There's a lot of CNBC, Fox Business, all get people on their channel to talk about things that are happening in the business world, and surveys are one of those ways that organizations get themselves known uh, for kind of the work that they do. And the one that caught my eye this week was uh, the Edelman survey. It's Edelman company itself is a communications company, is what they build themselves at. But uh, the survey, uh, as you can see here, I've got it up on Fox Business, um, said that the report referred to the expectations employees have of their employers as unprecedented, with employees saying that career advancement, 83% of those surveyed, personal empowerment, 80% of those surveyed, and societal impact are all strong expectations when considering a job, and lacking those factors could be a deal breaker. Well, the first thing I go to is I go to where the company, what they do, and in essence, this company uh, does a lot of ESG. Probably less ESG, but from the solutions that they have a lot of things on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so they already have a bias towards what they want their survey results to be. And I went back through their surveys, the number of surveys over the year, and they talk about T-tests and things of that sort. But the important part of a survey is the questions they ask, the sampling that you do, and how you go about um, that sampling. That's a whole nother. I've done brief pieces on surveys telling companies to quit doing the ones at the end of phone calls because they don't really tell you anything. Um, it's not random. It's not a random sample. You only get those people who either have a good experience or bad experience for the most part, and you miss out on really getting a sample of the phone calls that your organization is taking and how customers feel. So that's one of the reasons why I have, and I'll talk about it a little bit more at the end. Executives go and listen to the calls themselves. Um, but the Edelman survey, as they go through these things, as I said, I wanted to find out what the company is, uh, and you know what they're basically selling something, and they're selling DEI, how you can save the world with DEI. So I already know that bias exists, and I can kind of tell from reading the survey itself. There's a number of things in there that bend it in that particular direction. And you just have to look at some of these things when you get big macro surveys like this. They're talking about um, 7,000 surveys in 7 countries, and uh, you know they're very I'm not sure what the word would be, but um, they don't tell you much more than that. They've put a few notes in here, but doesn't really tell you anything about that general population. Does get into age groups that they looked at, but it's not going to really help an individual organization. It's interesting, I guess, maybe as far as I take it. But beyond that, it's not. There's nothing actionable here. But you'll certainly get HR people um, just, looking at something like this and then bringing it to an executive and saying, "Look, all of this is happening, and employees really want societal impact and activist CEOs, which actually 51% of employees in their survey said that they wanted an activist CEO. And, these are the things that I think sometimes get organizations into trouble. You look at, for instance, if we look at Ben and Jerry's, they made this stand on July 4th that we stole the land from the indigenous people here in the United States. And then what was kind of funny was that the the Indians from that area said, "Hey, you stole our land. You're manufacturing ice cream on our stolen land." So it kind of backfired on them a bit. And that's the way a lot of these things go. But Ben and Jerry's has long been kind of a liberal bastion. Some people may know that, some people don't. But they've always kind of represented that particular group. And for some people, that doesn't bother them, and they just eat ice cream and say, they have a decent ice cream, so I eat it anyway. Although we seem to be more polarized than that here in the United States lately. But what it boils down to is, as I mentioned, I don't put a lot of stock in these macro surveys. People seem to come out with their hair on fire over this stuff. I don't. And the other thing that they don't consider is, we're headed towards a recession here, and all these people that want, certain things out of a company, a lot of them are going to be happy to just have, a job within an organization here fairly soon. Unfortunately, we saw some weakness this week in the jobs reports, and I think they're just going to continue to decline from here. But what should you what are the takeaways here? Well, the first thing is that when I look at this, 83% want career development. Okay, I would say that probably makes sense. But you'd have to look at your organization and the pool of people that you might be interviewing. 80% want personal empowerment, and I hate that word, empowerment. In order for organizations to compete, they need to have employees better prepared to deal with bigger issues other than just answering the phone on a daily basis or provisioning, some service, say cable, laying cable for a cable company. They need to be broader system thinkers and be able to know, anticipate, changes in the marketplace. Because as I've said multiple times, the data that comes off of a spreadsheet doesn't get to an executive fast enough. You need really to have really knowledgeable workers about how the organization runs and those types of things. So, and being able to make decisions about your own work, and having the knowledge to be able to do that intelligently sets an organization apart so much. As far as societal impact types of things, I know that seems to be the hot thing, but that has gotten companies, into trouble. And you almost have to look at it from a standpoint of what's important to the customer is one circle, and to complete the Venn diagram, the other is what's important to the company. And when those two things really get out of line with each other, you get a Bud Light, you get a Target. I got some of the things that are going on with Disney right now, and the backlash is huge. So you have to understand who your customers are in order to make sure that those things are aligned together, and that we don't have two different circles with no overlap in that Venn diagram, uh, is a dangerous thing for any organization. And I've seen it more and more, because people are trying to accommodate a large but, or excuse me, a minor but vocal group of activists within an organization saying you need to do something. And Bob Chapek, from Disney, would be the first one to tell you probably a bad idea. Listening to one small group of people that are very vocal, and to me that lost him his job. Now, Iger's on his way out too, I think. But regardless, they have to understand who their customers are, and the thing you're getting nowadays from some CEOs. There's a whole series of things about BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, going out and influencing companies to take on ESG and DEI and those types of things. And what they're doing is they're misaligning not only a group of the maybe silent employees within the organization, but also the customers and the investors. More importantly, the money that they're investing in these either ETFs or through their 401k are being voted maybe contrary to what their opinion is about something. It's being lost, and they cover a lot of assets. And now the pushbacks happened enough to the point, and first of all, I think Larry Fink, and I'll put this video in right here, so we'll listen to that for a second.
You now make a point of that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year. And what we're doing internally is, if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race, or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities. And we're going to have to force change.
Okay, so like Larry Fink said, we're trying to force change, force behaviors on people and things of that sort. That's not a good idea. You're not going to force customers to adopt things unless you're the only game in town. And I think with some of the stuff that's going on with regards to ESG and DEI, they're adding in a whole series of personnel within the organization. They're adding in these people. Now they're taking them out, because they don't create value for the organization, and that's really the bottom line. Plus, they compromise the fiduciary responsibility, which I have a different episode on that particular piece. But these forced behaviors, this ESG, this DEI stuff, if you're going to be in a global marketplace, you're going to have to compete where whoever's creating the most value. Now, if your value creation is, ESG types of activities and DEI, like the Edelman company, then that's your shtick. That's what you're going to promote. But most companies aren't like that. They're providing some type of service, or they're making some type of product for the masses out there, and they compromise their company when they get out of line between what the organization supposedly stands for and what customers expect them to stand for. All right. So what's the solution to this? It's really quite simple. I especially have been doing a lot of work around the customer creed, that almost as a standalone product from my organization, so that you can understand what's important to the customer and see if your organization is aligned with that. And the customer creed is just basically an activity, and some of just a matter of coaching people and taking them through kind of a process of listening to calls, observing interactions with customers, and seeing what's happening within the organization, so that they not a macro survey, but actually listening, seeing, observing what's going on in the organization, so that they can develop this touchstone called a customer creed of things that are important to the customer. And if you've got an idea what those things are, you won't wind up like Bud Light or Disney or Target or any of these that have paid a tremendous price for what's going on. Everybody knows who their customers are. Now, if you want to force behavior on customers, you do that on your own. But you better know what is important to your customers and develop some type of touchstone for your organization to go to and say, customers probably aren't going to be bothered by these things, but if we do these things, that's core to why they do business with us. And so that is really one of the ways I wanted to cover. I see a lot of surveys like these off and on. They get a lot of attention, and whole companies take strategies in association with what they're hearing from companies that don't even have anything to do with their industry. But I think it's important that it's kind of like know thyself, before you start to look into what the broader picture is. Understand your picture and where you need to draw the line in your organization, because if we do this, we're going to wind up upsetting our customers, and what's important to the company cannot come into conflict with what the customers are, or you're going to lose customers. So that's really what I wanted to cover this week. It's kind of a long-winded way, and it just caught my eye, on these surveys that organizations do. But always look to see what their business is. If they're doing some type of survey, and what their quote-unquote solutions are within their organization. So anyway, that's what I wanted to cover this week. And remember, there is always a better way.